what made you leave your job at Microsoft, which is like a dream for most CS people, and start Olacabs?
So when I took the job at Microsoft, I was clear that मेरे को बहुत देर नौकरी नहीं करनी थी. It's a dream for CS guys, but my dream was different. I wanted to set up a business, and when I was starting up Olacabs, it didn't sound like a very glamorous or a big idea. In fact, my family disowned me. But as we've scaled, our vision has kept getting bigger and bigger. And when we started off, our view was there's a lot of fragmentation in the cab space, and we want to use technology to solve it. But over time, we've made our vision that we want to solve transportation problem as a whole. Yeah.
So what were the major challenges that you faced when you, throughout the course of your development of your startup, and how did you manage to overcome them, and what was the philosophy behind the startup?
So challenges keep changing at different steps of the startup. Once you start, the biggest challenge is to survive. You have no cash, you don't have a co-founder, nobody believes in your idea, and the biggest challenge is how do you just see yourself through the next month. Then you start seeing traction. Then the challenge becomes capital. Once you get capital, the challenge becomes team. That every startup, as it scales, goes through this cycle of challenges, and we faced all of them. And hopefully, we've solved each one of them for the better.
So, who are your biggest supporters or allies in this? Who do you think are like when an entrepreneur wants to start something? Who are his biggest backers? Who should he look up to?
For me, the inspiration was a lot of my seniors from IIT who had set up companies. There's a very close friend of mine now who was 4 years senior to me, called Harpreet, who set up CoCubes, and he's a very close friend. He was always an inspiration. A few other people were inspiration to me from the IIT network, and the IIT network has been a huge support system for me in terms of seniors who you can look up to, in terms of angel investors you can get money from, in terms of just getting meetings organized. I can just say that I'm from the IIT Bombay network, or I can get a connection to somebody else through somebody else who's from IIT Bombay. That's been a big support system.
So, and when you are talking to these backers, how do you convince them to invest in your idea, to invest in this project?
People invest in two things. One is a great team, and one is a big market opportunity. And agar dono honge, to you have to convince them of both. And if you convince him of the market, he will all assume that you are a good person because you've convinced him of the market.
So coming to your market, it seems at first glance that the taxi cab market is pretty crowded competition. So how do you distinguish Olacabs from the competition? What is your mantra or something like that?
It's crowded, but every big market gets crowded along the way, and over time it gets less crowded as one or two companies execute much better than others. And differentiation is primarily on just executing better than others. There is nobody has a magic wand. It's about the same principles, but whichever company and whichever team executes consistently on those principles wins the game. It's about discipline.
Okay. Yeah. So what our research team found out was that although you're from CSE, you handle the business part, whereas your co-founder Ankit was from MEC, is the CTO.
Yeah.
So why is that? It kind of breaks the stereotypical.
Yeah, even though I'm from CSE, I had more interest in the business side. I was not a very good computer science grad. And Ankit, my co-founder, he from day one of his IIT journey, he was always the geek. He was the biggest geek in the entire campus. MLC member tha, and he was the techie guy. And so even when we started off, he's the one who wanted to, and who was better positioned to handle technology.
So how did your stay at IITB help you in our entrepreneurial venture?
So many ways. I found my co-founder here. I found one of my angel investors from my IIT Bombay network. I got introduced to entrepreneurship as a concept and as a career choice here.
Okay. So do you think that IITB, the institute, is providing a self-sufficient environment for budding entrepreneurs?
I think the environment has also evolved over the past 10 years a lot. When I came, it was still very nascent. But now when I look at the activities happening, when I look at what ESL is doing, when I also look at the activities happening with the ecosystem outside of IIT also, just gives me so much pride.
So what advice would you give organization like ESL to help and strive to make better their contribution to entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So one specific thing I think ESL can do much better on is engaging the alumni. A lot of IIT Bombay alumni have achieved so much in life, and they want to give back, right? So, but I always feel, what more can I do? But I don't get an answer because nobody comes and asks me, कि आप ये भी कर दो, आप ये भी कर दो.
Duly noted. So, okay, that is nice. So coming to the Indian society, do you think the entrepreneurial culture is ready to take off in India, given how traditionally risk-averse Indian society has been? So do you see the startup culture taking off as much as it has in the US market or European countries?
Yeah. I think the fundamentals are very strong now in the Indian startup ecosystem also, and the broader society also. The broader society always had niche pockets of communities which are very business friendly and risk taking friendly. But over the past 20, 30, 40 years, we had become more of a service oriented society. That's changing a lot now with successes like Flipkart, with successes like Snapdeal, Redbus, to an extent Olacabs also is in that list. So with these successes, people are actually changing their minds. Yeah.
So what's your take on the traditional job versus entrepreneurship dilemma? So how does someone decide whether he wants to take the risky route, the so-called risky route, or just settle for that job and get into the rat race?
I think it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? Okay. You might take a decision कि अभी job करनी है, but 2 years down you might say, जैसे मैंने किया कि मेरे को अभी job हो गई मेरी, अब मेरे को धंधा करना है. So you have to you might take any decisions as long as eventually you're meeting your life's goal. And somebody might want not to do a startup, so it can't be forced. It has to be by choice. And if it is by choice, you can take your own path there. A lot of people start when they're 40 years old. Yeah. Narayan Murthy started very late. Yeah.
So, I'm sure there is an interesting story on how the name Olacabs came.
Yeah.
Is there?
The .com domain was available.
That is simple.
But we realized later that Ola means hello in Spanish. Yeah. And so actually it's a very nice, youthful name.
Okay, so what advice would you like to give to students who are budding entrepreneurs?
Make sure you work very hard towards whatever your goal is. Like I said, entrepreneurship is not a sprint; it's a marathon. And today, if you need to get a job to get that experience, you should go do that. If you need to, don't neglect the studies also. What academics gives you is not the grades, but the analytical thinking, and that analytical thinking is very useful in the business world also. So make sure that whatever you do it very, very well. And if it's entrepreneurship that you've chosen, I'm sure you'll excel.
What has been like the most defining moment in this journey so far?
Most defining moment was, I think, when we got our first customer. That feeling will never go away. Yeah, it was when you set up a business, you always dream of serving customers and dream of earning that first rupee. And when we got our first customer, that I have a very vivid memory of that moment.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. All right, thanks.